Hello and welcome to another edition of the Crypto Club and Digital Assets Weekly Catch-Up on Zoom. It is Sunday the 21st of November 2024 and who knows what we're going to talk about. Last week we went down the rabbit warren of talking about fiat currencies versus crypto, US presidential elections, regulation and so much more. Anyway, hope you enjoy this. Do remember to click on the like, subscribe, but even better, come on to a future session. They're open to everybody. With that, let's see who's going to come and join us today. Hey, Gabriella.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
I'm good. Today we've got Ken. Ken has just joined us. Hi, Ken. How are you, Ken?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Anything exciting in the crypto world?
No, I'm just watching the excitement as the crypto community thinks, are pumping up Trump's victory, really.
Yep. Well, but Bitcoin's gone up through $90,000, so that's certainly getting a little bit exciting. We'll see where it goes now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Silicon Valley sort of VCs are really happy because they're looking at regulation, and I think it's going to be really pro crypto regulation.
Yep.
There's a podcast I follow by the founders of one of the big VCs, basically. Ben Horowitz is actually on it, and he and his co-founder. Just before the elections, they came out pro-Trump, and they literally run A16Z, don't they? So, which is I would say the biggest crypto VC fund out there. And they said a lot of the companies they invested in or wanted to invest into, people didn't want to build because of regulation, and so I think they said out of the Senate. They fund or whatever they created or the super PAC they backed. They backed something like 96 senators or something, quite a lot of senators. I can't remember the number, but out of all the senators they backed the pro crypto position, something like 58 got through into the House basically. Okay. So they seem to have basically been making their money work for them, really.
Okay.
So that's been very interesting following that and following their end, what they think about it.
Yeah, it's certainly fascinating the way those things are going at the moment. So, hey, Manny, I see you've managed to join us now.
Yeah, it's nice to be back. Thanks. But yeah, interesting. Just hearing. I heard. I was trying to get my audio and everything sorted, but I heard some of what Ken was saying about Trump coming in, and obviously he had the surge in Bitcoin. I haven't looked too deeply into it. Obviously, my understanding is some of that is due to regulation, the fact that they think he's going to be more crypto friendly in terms of regulation. Is that right, Ken?
Yeah, that's essentially what they're saying, basically. And also it's because the main situation that they seem to complain about, there's no regulation, but on the other hand, the regulators have got no guidance. So they just sit back and wait for you to do something. Said, "Oh, you've done something wrong." And when they go to them and try to speak to them, say, "Look, can you give us guidance?" Gary Gensler and his crew just don't give them any guidance. And so everybody from Coinbase and all the way down to all the smaller projects, that's one of the things that they're really upset about. It's okay, if there's no regulation, at least give us guidance. And that's where the gap seems to be.
It seems really encouraging because in the past, as you say, a lot of regulators don't tell you what you can do, but they will tell you what you can't do. And they'll vary that as it goes along. And this is why, as you say, you get this regulatory uncertainty where sometimes companies have been in touch with the likes of the SEC and said, like, this is what we're looking to do. Is this permissible? And on occasions, they've had responses back saying, no, you can't do that because, it's obviously a security, so you have to go down the security route or whatever. But sometimes the regulators have chosen to not give a direct answer and have kind of said, well, it might be okay, it might not. And this is where I think the UK and the US operate a similar principle, where you can get what's called a no action letter, which is where you notify the regulator of what you're intending to do. And the regulator sends you a letter to say, you've told us what you're going to do. We're not sure whether it's permitted or not, but we're not going to take any action against you. So we're not going to take any action. So it's kind of as good as you're going to get for permission. But that's not great. If you're a startup or something, you want certainty that something is permitted. You don't want the uncertainty that it might not be permitted. But
Yes.
yeah.
The no startup letter thing. I remember during the I think it was the Senate committee hearings where they were grilling Gary Gensler about things like that because a lot of companies had actually tried to approach it from that point of view. We'll get one of those letters, and he was like, "Yeah, we definitely give them that." And anyway, they produced this one company that nobody knew about, and like didn't they'd given them like a no action letter sort of about 3 4 years ago, but they hadn't built anything. And I think it was the SEC knowing that a question would probably pop up in the future about a no action letter, so they just gave these guys and they just sat on this letter, didn't build anything, and said, "Oh yeah, we handed it out to this company. I can't remember the name of the company, but they gave them that letter I think in 2018, and these hearings were I think in 2022." They hadn't built anything, and it was just extremely different, basically.
Yeah, here you go. Pocket full of quarters incorporated in connection with the quarters gaming token, which I'm sure you all remember on the Ethereum platform. And yeah, as you say, they got a no action letter in 2019. In fact, and I think you're right that was the one that the SEC said, "Oh yeah, we've issued these," but in reality, they probably hadn't. So yeah, good memory on that, Ken. Well remembered.
So what does a no action letter actually mean in terms of legally? What does it dictate?
It means that the regulator is saying, in all probability, we're probably not going to take legal action against you.
For whatever you're doing.
Yes, yeah. Which is kind of the opposite. If I remember correctly, a no action letter is basically, we think what you're doing is probably okay, so we're not going to do anything about it. Or we think what you're doing is technically not okay, but we're really not that worried about it. The corollary, the kind of the opposite they can do, is they can issue what's effectively a cease and desist letter, which is where they can write to you to say, even though we don't know what law you were breaking, we think you might be, so please stop doing what you're doing. So I've known a couple of companies in the UK who've had that, where they were undertaking some business. They've been very rigorous in their due diligence. They checked they weren't breaking any laws or anything. Couldn't find any regulations at fault, but nonetheless, they got like a cease and desist letter to say, you may be breaking the rules, so we request that you stop the business that you're doing. And I know one company wrote back to say, well, if you tell us which rules specifically we're breaking, then we'll stop. But until then, we'll presume that we're not. So, hey, sorry, so just been joined by Sebastian as well. Hey, Sebastian.
Hello there.
Hey, welcome aboard. Just talking about the latest development in the US with Trump appointing various people and hopefully it leading to some regulatory clarity in the crypto space.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think it needs to happen. There are discussions to change the chairman of SEC, Mr. Gary.
Yeah, Gensler.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see what's happening next.
I mean, with the change of Gensler, I'm taking the approach, we'll wait and see. Because I remember when he got appointed, everybody was, I mean, even I was extremely upbeat about his appointment. I went and looked at all his videos, when he was lecturing about blockchain. And yeah, I mean, everything seemed really good. And then I think 6 to 8 months into it, he suddenly switched and flipped. He went from being friend to foe.
I think you're right, because from what I remember, I saw some of the early lectures, as you say. He seemed at least to be quite knowledgeable about the technology, so that's good.
And he was also very pro it. If you watched his lectures, he talked about it, so this being technology of the future and how he's going to reinvent the finance sector, the logistics and stuff like that. And it was very technical. And he had really good speakers, actually, who he invited to in his classes to also come and speak on specific elements of blockchain. And so if you actually, anybody who attended any of his lectures or watched it prior to him being SEC would have thought this guy's going to be very pro crypto and pro blockchain. But yeah, like I say, I don't know what happened inside when he got in there with the with the politicians. He just flipped onto the other side.
Yeah, but it did seem it was quite a sudden change, wasn't it? So it'll be interesting to see where it goes because, as you say, no matter who you appoint, they may change their attitude once they're in post, and ultimately, the kind of like prime purpose of a regulator is to provide protection, not to innovate at the risk of potentially affecting the economy or the financial system, sorry, and not exposing consumers to too much risk. And that's a difficult balance to strike. But I think most people who are in the crypto space are saying up till now the balance has been in favor of overprotection. And maybe with innovation, we need a little bit more willingness for people to lose, potentially.
How would you analyze the UK's position within the whole? Do you think the balance is right, or?
I think if you speak to people in the crypto industry, they'd say it's way off at the moment. I think the FCA is highly protective, which is kind of what you want a regulator to be in a way, that they're highly protective in terms of preventing systemic risk, so impact on the overall financial system, but also on the protection of consumers. The problem is that the way that the rules and regulations come about, what they're suggesting as protection feels a little bit like parents telling their children off type thing. But I remember a case in point was the FCA did a market study and public engagement around crypto derivatives. So not straightforward cryptocurrency, but crypto assets that were backed by crypto currency. So like futures and options and ETFs as the typically known electronic traded funds. And the FCA did a lot of research, published a paper, and the results of that was that 97% of the respondents were in favor of crypto assets derivatives being provided to the public.
Yeah, I remember that.
The FCA disagreed and they banned them from retail use. So
I was one of the people who responded to it because there was a big push within the community at the time for people to respond to it. And it was quite simple. You went to the website, filled in your details, and then gave your point of view. And there was a template that was provided by, I can't remember the name of the company, but it was an EU-based company. I think I used their template and stuff like that. But you're very right. You know, I was just surprised because first of all, they put the results out with 96 or 97% being pro. So everyone thought, oh, well. And then they just turned around and said, oh, well, we're still going against it. So I think they just did the consultation because it's mandated by legislation. There had no intention of actually following through on what the consultation said.
Well, it's one of those things. It's like councils now where they have to go through what is called public consultation. But public consultation doesn't mean necessarily agreeing with what the public says. It just means giving them an opportunity to say something. So the initial thing, I just popped it up here, was the FCA banned that. That was in October 2020, by the look of it. And I think they issued some subsequent guidance as well, which basically said even more, yes, we're not allowing it.
I wonder how that extends to fund managers, because I've got two friends. One is a small cap fund manager in the city here in London, and the other one is based in Singapore. And from my last conversation with the guy in Singapore, he used to be based in Dubai and then he moved over to Singapore. And I think they do, from a fund point of view, do invest in crypto, but obviously that's a different country and it's not regulation as just geared towards retail investors, which might be different. But at a fund
I was going to say that is the other thing. So non-retail i.e. organizations or like hedge funds or whatever, not individuals, they are allowed to invest in crypto derivatives. And this is where we've seen some of that happening. So I saw an announcement the other day of some company that is now including, I think it's something like 3% exposure to Bitcoin in its pension fund, which was quite a dramatic thing. I mean, 3% is not dramatic, but the sheer announcement that they're doing it was.
Yeah, that's quite interesting that you're allowed to have the risk exposure at a fund level, but not at the retail level. But I guess that's making the assumption that you would assume that the fund manager is more informed and would manage the risk so that they might have 3% of their portfolio in crypto, whereas a retail investor might, put his, remortgage his house to invest in crypto, for example.
Yep. And
Yeah.
I think that was the argument. Yep.
And also, I think, with if you're, I don't know, a fund manager or a business or whatever, and it all goes pear-shaped, that's it, you just lick your wounds and move on. But for retailers, things go wrong, they start running off to regulators, to their local MPs.
And that's exactly it. So what you usually find is that the way it works is that a little granny loses her life savings or whatever, and her family get in touch with the MP gets in touch with the regulator, or stirs up a storm in Parliament or something, and then the regulator reacts and responds. So in this case, I think what the FCA has done is they've kind of like preempted that risk, which is where it comes down to what needs to be a proportionate regulatory response. Most people think it was like disproportionate. What's interesting, I just pulled up now the IFA. So this is an organization who are kind of like responsible for the independent financial advisor space. They published this article about the first UK pension scheme that has now invested in crypto. So I was right, allocating 3% of its assets to crypto. So I suspect we're going to see more of these, which again...
I saw a podcast with the one of the advisors to the pension scheme who was like kind of helped walk them through it. It was very interesting podcast. I think I saw it on YouTube. But essentially, they'd been to a lot of the basically pension funds, and apparently it's to do with how the pension funds interpretate the regulation more than what the regulation says they can and can't do.
Okay.
So it's them saying, well, we can't do this because we're not allowed to, rather than there being anything saying that they're not allowed to. So they're extremely risk averse in how they interpret the regulation. So we'll see how that moves on.
Yeah, that's what I find fascinating.
Sorry,
as well.
guys, I'm going to have to jump off just for 15, 20 minutes to have dinner, and then I'll try and jump back on.
Manny, speak to you later. No worries.
Bye.
Yeah, Ken, it's interesting, isn't it? You always think of regulations and laws as being like black and white, nice and clear, not open to interpretation there. But in actual fact, they're exactly the opposite quite often. And it is the whole, this is why some lawyers are very well paid working out how to weave their way around the interpretations of things. And they quite often utilize lack of clarity or whatever as a means to get things done. So I find it fascinating because I think that traditionally, you always think as laws and regulations being very, very clear, very, very unambiguous of you can do this, you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. But there is this kind of wriggle room in between. So yeah, be interesting to see where that goes with that pension fund and if others begin to go down the same route.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say that this is pretty normal when it comes to innovation, right? Because when it's something new, it's less clear, right? And the more the technology advances, like the more clarity it brings into the space. So I think we just need to be patient. We are still early, and yeah, I think more things will uncover soon.
I think you're right. I think there's a couple of other things to bear in mind as well. In the UK, an interesting development a while ago was every year the government publishes the latest Finance Act, So this is to do with the rules and regulations around finance and the FCA and that. And in the last act that was passed in 2023, there was an interesting point in it about extending the scope of the FCA to include, I think one of their new objectives was to provide a regulatory competitive environment, I think was the statement, which basically means that the government was saying to them, look, try and figure out ways of making the regulations such that it still protects, the granny's life savings and that, but is a little bit more friendly to companies who are looking to innovate. So that was quite a major thing in 2023. Now we've got it in the UK in 2024. We've got a new government which is talking a lot about re-energizing the economy, supporting the latest industrial revolution, by which they mean things like artificial intelligence and that kind of thing. But again, they're talking about trying to kickstart the economy by providing regulatory friendly facilities. So it'd be interesting again if that means that they're going to buy into supporting crypto a little bit more. We'll see.
Well, I mean, when you look at regulation, a lot of people do like the EU regulation, but I think that it's just going to hamper. I can't see any really groundbreaking companies coming out of the EU because I think the regulation is so stifling. Innovation is going to have to happen somewhere else. It's just it's going to be the same way it is now with the likes of Facebook and all the innovations happening in China or in Asia and in US. And that's because in the EU, if you go back a while back, even when those newer companies were taking off, which are now old, like the Googles, the regulation in the EU, I think, stifled a lot of them. And I think the new crypto regulation is going to do the same. I think what you're going to get is a situation where you're going to get companies in the EU, but they're not going to be the world dominant companies, simply because the regulation with their new crypto regulation, I think is very stifling. Someone was telling me there's a limit on how much stable coins you can transfer around if you're based in the EU. I mean, something as simple as stable coins, if you put a limit of, like, I think they say 10,000 euros for a business, that's nothing.
Stable coins are an interesting one though, because there's a different attitude around stable coins by their very nature. A stable coin that is stabilized against a state a state currency. So, for example, Tether against the US dollar, or GB pound against GBP, I think it's called. I think it's the stable coin that's available. The risk is that if you link a cryptocurrency to a fiat currency, then potentially that cryptocurrency could start influencing the underlying currency itself. And that's where the regulators get really worried about systemic problems. So that's where you may notice various regulators have put in place regulation preventing stable coins for exactly that reason.
But the thing is, the regulations are geographic specific. So let's say I want to run a euro stable coin, and I'm based in the let's say, for example, let's say I choose to base myself in Germany, for one of a better place. And I have a competitor who also wants to run a euro-based stablecoin and chooses to base themselves outside the EU. The competitor, has that advantage because all they have to do is say, okay, because a lot of stablecoins are not actually backed one for one by the actual currency that they float against, so they're not going to go, if you've got €1 million worth of you're backing one to one and you issue €1 million tokens, so you need €1 million. They're not going to go out there and buy €1 million. They might get 500 million worth of euros or 400 million worth of euros. Then the rest will be some other instruments. They might buy government bonds and whatever. And so they could do that just as well and base themselves outside the EU and operate just as well. The only thing is, obviously, if they decide to accept European-based customers. So they could just have a two-tier approach where you'll have one specific division of your company, or let's say subsidiary, which will just deal with those European customers, and the other subsidiary will deal with everybody else in the world. Kind of the way at the moment is how it's happening within the rest of the world and US. You'll see a lot of crypto projects. They'll have two divisions. They'll have a subsidiary that deals with just the US, and then their main business deals with everybody in the world. And that's just what's gonna happen with stablecoins. It's not really gonna resolve that issue that the EU want to resolve. It's just gonna mean if you're a European citizen, you're just going to be cut out of certain aspect of things. They'll say, okay, are you a resident in the EU? If you say yes, they'll say, well, you can't use this product, and they'll give you an inferior version. And that's why some of these tougher regulations, I think, are a bit too early. And you can't even regulate things like DAI, which are basically algorithmic stablecoins. That's not going to really be regulated. How are you going to regulate? Who are you going to pull? I mean, who are you going to pull into court for an algorithmic stablecoin?
So I think that was the thing, that the notes I'd seen from regulators was about fiat-backed stablecoins, not pure algorithmic ones, which might solve what you're describing there.
Yeah, but even with fiat-backed, as you see, the issue is it will only affect those resident in the EU. And I remember watching this, I think it was CNBC, and there was, I think, one of the commissioners, and she was really pushing for regulation, strong regulation. She was talking about, she wasn't talking about crypto, but she was just talking about general regulation in the EU. And her point of view was, we have to have the strongest regulation in the world because we're a big market, and that means all the other countries will be forced to follow our regulation. So that's the mindset, obviously, that's coming out of the commissioner, meaning that the strongest regulation is what they would really like, which is opposite to what's going to happen in America. So now we've got clear blue. I think we're going to have clear blue water between heavy regulation and non-regulation, and we'll see who the winner, which countries and which economies really come out as winners.
I think you're right. Sorry, I just pulled up something from the American Bar Association, which is looking at stable coins and, well, as we were saying, about fiat-backed stable coins and crypto-backed ones and everything. I agree that I think this is an interesting area. And you take a look at the market cap of fiat-backed stable coins is growing, so there's certainly something going on there. But the EU, they've got MiCA, so the markets in crypto asset regulation. That's quite good. That defines, I think they're called ART, assets reserve tokens, if I remember correctly. Asset reference tokens, that's right, which effectively are fiat-backed crypto stablecoins. So they're certainly thinking about this and putting in place some regulations. But as someone wrote the other week about crypto and AI, Europe is probably one of the most highly regulated environments that is doing the least with technology. So it's kind of interesting that Europe is certainly very good at putting in place regulation to prevent things going wrong when it's not even that particularly strong in that kind of space. So, yep, interesting stuff.
Yeah, with that AI, it's also AI regulation. It's going to be, at the beginning, it's going to be easy, but towards the end, it's going to be difficult. Because I was speaking to a friend of mine who's basically they call them penetration testers, and basically they work for companies to try and break into the white hackers to ensure that the security is up to scratch. And one of the things he told me about AI, he said it's a zero-day attack, and I said, what's a zero-day attack? And he basically goes, a zero-day attack is basically when you get a virus or something like that nobody's seen before. At the moment, what happens is vulnerabilities are found either internally or by bad actors. But in the end, you end up knowing where it's coming from and so forth. But if an AI finds out a vulnerability, at the moment they have mechanisms to stop it. But who knows in the future? Because apparently the systems are learning so quick. The AI could then go do a zero-day attack without the humans even knowing. And by the time the humans know, it could have covered up its track.
Yeah. That's why I find it fascinating that they're trying to put in place regulations around this space in an area that's evolving so fast. So the likes of, I think, Dark Trace, who are like a cyber vulnerability and cybersecurity company, if I remember correctly, they're doing a lot of stuff where they're using AI to detect exactly the kind of thing you're describing, and doing interesting heuristics, which is basically looking at, is something behaving differently? So this does kind of extend into the crypto domain, because if you think about, we tend to think of cyber attacks at the moment as being, some hacker has got into someone's computer network and has either stolen data, corrupted data, or whatever. But what happens if a hacker gets into a stable coin and either manipulates the algorithm, or manipulates the data that's feeding the algorithm, which is probably the more likely thing? And what happens if that hacker is using AI to do that? We then end up in a very interesting situation of, again, this is where if that crypto stablecoin is linked to a fiat currency, then you could potentially have bad actors who are fiddling around with how the stablecoin's operating, and that could start affecting the fiat currency that it's associated with.
I mean, talking about, there's a company, I saw their demo. They're called Humans AI or Humans AI or something like that. I think Humans AI they were called. I saw them when I was in London just recently when I was back. They produced this demo and it was just brilliant. And so this AI which they've created, you basically interact with it via voice. So you tell it. The demo they did was, can you start? Can you create a stable coin? Can you then take that stable coin and launch it? Basically, can you basically program, not a stable coin, a meme coin, program this meme coin for me, and then launch it on a blockchain, find out which blockchain it would work best, and then they fed it a Twitter account that they already owned. So use this Twitter account, post on it, monitor it, keep posting on it, and so forth. And everything was done, and you could see it's sent there. It showed the smart contract that it created. It chose Solana, I said, because that's where a lot of meme coins are. It went on pump.fun and created, and actually everything was done literally within 5 minutes. And then it sent a tweet. So they said, we're going to leave it running. But at the end, what was interesting was he had to give the AI command, do not try and shield the coin. Do not do anything that's going to, all this do not. So like, that's how it ended. It's just like a list of about 50 things for it not to do. Because if you don't give it those instructions, and it basically picks up on I don't know, let's say there's a specific topic which is just pumping the coin for no reason. It could try and pump the coin, and then somebody starts dumping, and then stop dumping the coin. And so do not do a pump and dump. Do not. And just so, I mean, the list of no's was at the end was just unbelievable.
It's fascinating when you look at how people are training AI, and how, exactly as you say, if they're using incentive-based mechanisms, which an incentive-based mechanism, for those who don't know, is where you train the AI by giving it a reward. So if it heads in the right direction, you give it a reward and everything. And The problem is that AIs don't have any morals or any scruples. And so ultimately, if you train it to use whatever it needs to do in order to get rewarded, then it'll come up with some quite fiendish ways of achieving it. And if that means it thinks that the best way of doing it is manipulate the market, it'll manipulate the market. So you do have to put, as Ken says, these kind of explicit controls in of don't do this, don't do that. And I know I've certainly seen some horror stories in the defense sector. There was the story, I think it came out about a year ago now, which some of you may have heard about, where they were using AI for drone tasking. So the idea was, using drones to go and attack the enemy. But it was done on a gameplay environment. So they were kind of like war gaming and simulating this. And allegedly, there was a conference where this US military guy said that what actually happened during one of the war games was that the drone control AI was using a reward-based mechanism to target things. And eventually it realized it got better and better at targeting things if it ignored its human controller. And so the human controller obviously thought that's not good. And then the AI figured out that the best thing to do was to kill the human controller, because that stopped the human controller from saying, don't do that. And so the story was that was a conference where this military guy was saying, oh, this is what happened. And then subsequently, the US military published an addendum to say, oh, no, the guy was only talking about theoretically what could happen. And honestly, this really didn't happen in a war game simulation. Honest type thing. So you extend that to crypto and market manipulation. And I think there's lots of risks and opportunities there.
Sorry, I just came back. That sounds like a fascinating story in terms of what Ken was saying about this tool that's used to generate, launch a coin, pump it up. I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I had a cousin a couple of weeks ago who's actually a dentist. Sorry to interrupt, but he was talking about Pump Fund, and that sounds like I'm not an expert on this, but Pump Fund I think is a platform where you launch coins, and it's Solana based. Is that correct?
Yeah, Pump.fun.
Yeah. So it's like, everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon, and I guess this kind of tool does allow anyone really just to, you don't even have to be a programmer. It helps if you are, obviously, then you can customize stuff. But even if you're not, you can quite quickly get something up and running and pump up the coin. But I suppose the question is, if thousands of people are out there doing this and they are aware of these tools and they launch something, how many are actually going to succeed in terms of pumping their coin up and selling it, or creating a legitimate coin even?
Well,
people
seem to be.
Go ahead, Ken.
What it is, though, with Pump.fun, they market themselves as building communities. That's their whole kind of ethos. We're a community, and so it's supposed to get rid of the people kind of like dumping or founder dumping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really do that.
So it actually does what it's saying it's not doing, which is to allow you to pump up a coin.
Yeah. So, but what it's supposed to do is pump up the coin. But then, if you're a community member, it basically apparently does not allow the way they've designed the system is so that the founder can't rug pull. So they're only solving for one thing, which is rug pull.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And in that case, I suppose they are kind of, I'd say maybe 30% right in that they don't do that. I mean, there was this famous one where this, I don't know, he looked 14, 15-year-old, let's just say maybe 15, maybe 16, looked about 12, I'd say. Boy, he went on there. Basically what he did is he first of all set up a YouTube account. He created he then set up a Twitter account and started streaming that, and I think other streaming sites too. He then created a coin on Pump.fun. Obviously, being the founder, you get a lot of coins. Mm-hmm. And then he got his mum to come there, and he was like, if you buy more of this, she's going to take off her top, she's going to do this, she's going to take off her bra. So he pumped up the coin, and by the time it was like to take off her bra, she said she's not going to do that. But by that time, he'd made something like, I don't know, $100,000, and then he just like closed he closed down all his social media and everything. But because obviously you did it on YouTube and stuff like that, those recordings are out there, so they're saved for. So it's one of those things. So he closed everything, and there was all this thing of, oh, how can the mums do that to the kid? They should send her to social services and so forth. But obviously, it did not solve for the founder dumping the. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yep.
So it didn't.
I suppose the mum could get done for financial fraud, whereas I guess the kid is too young to be prosecuted.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah, but it's only financial fraud if they want to come after you, see. And that's the thing. It's the regulators will
where was this? Was this UK or US that this happened?
Looks like it's US. I'm just looking at
US,
the
I
story
think it
now.
was.
Yeah.
The regulators
Yeah.
the regulators will come after you if there's a lot of harm done to people and they can prove it. Because the regulators, on the other hand, are also they're overburdened with work.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a lot of these things going on.
I think one of the biggest concerns, and it's not even a joke, is that you've got an irate person who's lost money out of this coin turning up with a handgun, especially as it's in the US. And that is not even a joke. I think that's a very real risk that you run with this kind of stuff, especially in the United States.
Yeah, definitely. I think in any part of the world, if you rug pull somebody, they can get extremely angry. It's not obviously it's not. But I say so. Pump the fund, as we can see here, didn't really resolve for its original purpose, which is we're going to try and make sure founders cannot rug pull. And this situation,
this guy did, yeah.
But it's kind of interesting again, isn't it? You think about it. If somebody sets up a website where they've said, right, I've got this token that you can buy the token, and if you buy more tokens, then someone starts taking the clothes off and that kind of thing. Where is that regulated? Because that's not a security, so it's not the SEC. It's not a commodity, so it's not CFTC. I'm not quite sure where that kind of fits.
Yeah, you probably need a lawyer to be able to explain that to us.
Yeah, but it shows as well how it is that crypto invariably starts intersecting with the traditional places as well. I've often argued that certain industries and sectors, such as the sex industry, generally are at the leading edge of pushing technology and innovating, because they're generally the least regulated markets. And so you often see things where either it's completely criminal, and criminals are highly innovative because they don't have regulatory constraints, or they push the boundaries of technology. So like porn sites were known for being some of the leaders in online payment technology. So they really push the boundaries around that. And we all know about how internet speeds were increased for videos and all this kind of thing. So I find it fascinating how you get this intersection between crypto and the sleazier side of the world. And it looks like, as you say, Pump.Fund didn't solve that. So interesting space.
What is in terms of, I mean, apologies if I'm not an expert in this area, but you have, I don't know how many coins launch per day, and with these AI tools that Ken has mentioned, that it seems like anybody really from their bedroom, even a 12-year-old, can use an AI tool to launch a crypto. But what would differentiate, crypto A from crypto B, and whichever platform it's on, Pump Fund or wherever else, and in terms of how it's marketed, and what intrinsic value does one cryptocurrency have over another, apart from just being pumped up because it, for example, it might be a political coin like Trump coin or something, for example, which people jump on the bandwagon of. But what value does it have, apart unless it's, for example, an exchange mechanism or something like Ethereum where you can actually build applications.
So I put a position forward, and happy that everyone else joining as well. If you look back at what happened with the NFT craze, that was something similar, whereby an NFT, which was an image of an ape, for example, was getting some crazy prices in the market, not because it was anything of intrinsic value, nor did it represent anything of scarcity or anything like that. It was pure play hype in a marketplace. This is why I still sometimes describe some crypto activities as being like playing with Pokemon cards in the playground. The reason something's worth something is simply because someone's decided it is and there's enough of a market for it. So to answer your question, Manny, about why some things seem to be do better than others, it might simply be that they've been hyped up better. It might be they've connected into a particular community. So it might be that they're supporting a particular specialist area, whether that's through particular computer games or supporting football clubs or whatever, really.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing fundamentally holding the value in any way. There's not an underlying asset behind it.
Yeah,
it's just whoever hypes it back best. I don't know what do others think. Am I right with that?
Well, I think there's a difference. There's those meme coins that just have zero intrinsic value. Just is to do with marketing. Whoever can market it best. You get the people come in. They'll just essentially use it as it's just a betting spree. So you just go in there and you hope your coin goes up. If it doesn't, you just move on and you lose it. So that's one element, which is the betting element. And then there's the other element, which I think is going to be the future, more of the future, which there is actual intrinsic usage of them. So, I mean, he mentioned already things like, I don't know, the Ethereum coin or the Bitcoin, which actually you can actually use it transactionally. I mean, but you got to think of other things. So, for example, one that comes to mind is Filecoin, which is a storage coin. You actually earn, and you need those in order to be able to store your data it's basically a decentralized storage. So you, rather than having like cloud storage on Web3, so not Web3 on AWS, it's trying to mimic that, but using it on Web3. Now, how are you going to incentivize the people or companies or whatever to store that data that you own? So if your data on AWS, you own it, but AWS can lock you out of it at any time. But if you use something like, for example, the Filecoin system, or Arweave is another one. So one of them works on permanent and the other one is non-permanent. But what it happens is you actually own the data, so nobody can actually cut you out of your data. So those coins are intrinsic into how the protocol works. So there is a distinction between some coins. So, but the ones that get the loudest shouts and the loudest kind of things on TV and so forth are the meme coins, because simply they will pump up and then they'll just disappear after, I don't know, 6 months, whatever.
And they might be pumped up by a high profile person like, Elon Musk pumping up Dogecoin, for example.
Yeah, but
I just showed that now, in fact. So Dogecoin, it's got a market cap of $52 billion.
yeah, I mean, that's the original meme coin. So I think that might last for a long time because it's gone through the Lindy effect, which basically, if something just lasts for a long time, the likelihood of it staying longer actually increases. So I think because it's the actual first. I mean, some people could say BSV, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision was a meme, but at least you've got the infrastructure there and you can do things with that coin. But Doge was the first original meme where it was like, this is my coin, and it's basically a dog coin. And even the founder, when he began it, just said, look, this is a joke coin I'm putting out there, and people just started, it was the first meme where people just took to it. And so that's why it's still there. But if you look back to a lot of memes that they just come and go. I mean, you've had Baby Dodge, I think it's still there. You've got, I don't know, it's just, I mean, like you say, because it's so easy to create meme coins, they're just like hundreds and hundreds,
Well,
thousands.
I think going back to like kind of like the celebrity association, and this is where I believe that the SEC has started going after some celebrities now who endorsed certain cryptos on the basis that they were effectively promoting the security. Dogecoin I find particularly interesting because of the Elon Musk connection, because we all know with Trump being appointed, one of the things he's announced is he's launching a new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which is going to be led by Elon Musk. And you start going, was that planned? You know, there's something interesting there, that you've got a crypto that every time Elon Musk used to mention Doge or dogs or anything, Dogecoin would hype. Now all of a sudden you're going to have a US government department with the same name. So you kind of start wondering, well, is this part of a Elon Musk master plan that if you identify government efficiencies, you'll be awarded with Dogecoin or something, which could make Doge, quite valuable in some ways.
Well,
Just
hypothetically.
hypothetically.
That's always been the thing about Dodgers. Every time I think a lot of the diehards keep saying that it's going to be used as a payment system within Twitter. That seems to be the narrative. That's been actually for a long time the narrative that he's going to be using it as a payment system in his networks. But really, when you think about it, I doubt it. I mean, it's simply because does it even do its own validations? I don't think it does it on validations. I think the way it works is it doesn't even have its own mining. You have to actually piggyback off somebody else's miner. I don't know how it works, but I don't think you can actually mine it, or it gets mined by itself. It's kind of like, I think, piggybacks off other miners. So if you look at it from a security wise, I mean, purely, it means that it can't be secure. Okay, it's decentralized, I'd say, definitely. But something that doesn't even, the consensus is dependent on somebody else's consensus. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he's got a lot of smart people in there who'd kind of question using it as their main transaction element.
So your other thing to remember as well is that Twitter, or X as it's known these days, has already got a micropayments facility built into it.
Yeah,
a lot of people aren't aware of TipJar, which is the ability to make like micropayments for tips and that kind of thing. And the thinking was, are they looking at linking in TipJar with crypto, and potentially extending the abilities? So, but yeah, again, I really don't know where this is going to go as to.
Talking about Twitter, I mean, this is again another thing that sometimes when I'm in the circles and I speak to some people, they'll mention it just like offhand, because when he took over it as X, he got rid of he made a whole load of changes. So previously, they had a really good API. You could actually go into Twitter and you can get the data, and so you can see what's trending, what's not trending, and so you could kind of reverse engineer and work out if it favors one kind of type of thought or another. But they've got rid of that. You can't do that. What you can do, what they have done though, is they've open sourced the code, or sorry, their algorithm, not the code, but the algorithm of that they use. So taking it back to crypto, you can then build yourself a bot, use that algorithm as your base, and try and work out exactly how it basically how the Twitter algorithm is working, and then you can spin up obviously your meme coin and try and basically post things that. So, for example, if the algorithm likes things that are just extreme, whether to the left or to the right, then you just make sure you post things that are extremely extreme so that you can get that engagement. Now, if the engagement's within the first 2-3 hours, then you've got to obviously post within every 2-3 hours. If you then find out you're getting penalized for it, you can space out the post. But having the algorithm data open sourced, some crypto guys, maybe women as well, or groups or whatever, are actually using it and trying to basically say, look, how can we make money for this using both that and the meme coins. And so that's why you get so much stuff being pumped into Twitter with regards to, you go and check the coin and you'll see, oh yeah, well, this coin's just been launched 4 days ago, and it will just disappear because a new one will come. Because if it doesn't work, you just
Sounds like
dump
they
it.
designed it. They've allowed that API for the very purpose of pumping up coins.
No, they got rid of the API, so you can't get the data to work things out and see how Twitter works. But they've put out their algorithm so if you have your algorithm out there, you can say, look, we don't actually support any thought. Everything is free speech, which is actually, I mean, it sounds good, but technically it's kind of a bluff move, because what really the only way to find out if they support one end or the other is by having access to the data. Then you'll see which posts are uprated and which one the algorithm moves up more and so forth. Because, for example, if you have person A or group A that like to use the like button and group B that like to use the share button, you could then just manipulate it so that those that click any post that click the like get more viral activities than those that have the share. So just having the data set, that doesn't mean anything.
Can I just quickly, we're going to have to close off in a moment, but I do find it interesting, Musk's philosophy around publishing open source is really, really interesting, because he plays a very clever strategy game on that. So you think about one of the companies he operates, Tesla. Tesla open sourced a lot of their stuff around EV technology, and they actually think it was kind of like a poison pill for the mainstream car manufacturers. So Toyota, BMW have all started using effectively Tesla technology a number of years ago now for their vehicles. And what that did was it kind of overnight grew the potential adoption of EV, because it wasn't growing at the pace that Tesla needed. So yeah, open source is an interesting thing because it provides a lot of innovation opportunities.
I mean, I'm very pro open source. I think everybody
But
most what do you call it? I think most people in crypto are open source.
Yeah. It's certainly something, and certainly on the security side, I've found that people are working with crypto tokens where the code is open source, it's accessible. Certainly people prefer it. Folks, really, as is often the case in these sessions, we're going to have to close this off now as we're out of time. So Elena, sorry I didn't manage to bring you in. I saw you joined us earlier. Gabriella, thanks for listening in on that. And Sebastian, Ken, Manny, everybody, thank you very much for the contributions. Do come again next week, because that was another interesting session. Really enjoyed that. Thank you very much and have a great day.